In January 1923, an entire black town in Florida was burned to the ground in 5 days, and then erased from history for 70 years. No monuments, no schoolbooks, almost no one spoke its name. That town was called Rosewood, and what happened there is one of the darkest cover-ups in American history. Rosewood sat in the swamps and pine forests of central Florida. By the early 1920s, it had become a predominantly black community, and a prosperous one. Families owned their own land and homes. There were 2 general stores, a church, a school, and even a baseball team. The people of Rosewood worked the land, milled timber, and traded with the neighboring white town of Sumner, just a few miles away. It was the segregated South, and tensions always simmered beneath the surface. But Rosewood was a community that, against the odds, was standing on its own 2 feet. On the morning of January 1st, 1923, a young white woman in Sumner named Fannie Taylor was found beaten and bruised. She claimed she had been attacked by a black man. To this day, many historians doubt her story, and some believe she was covering for a different visitor entirely. But in the Jim Crow South, her accusation alone was all the spark that was needed. Word spread fast. A black man named Jesse Hunter had reportedly escaped from a nearby work camp, and the mob decided he was their suspect. A posse of white men formed and went hunting. They seized a Rosewood blacksmith, tortured him for information, and killed another man, Sam Carter, when his answers didn't satisfy them. Over the next few days, the violence grew. The accusation had become an excuse. The mob swelled with men from surrounding counties. Some estimates say as many as 200 or 300. But here's the part that should stop you cold. Their target was no longer one man. It was all of Rosewood. The people of Rosewood knew what was coming. Many fled into the surrounding swamps to hide in the cold, January nights, but others gathered together to make a stand. And the center of that stand became the home of Sarah Carrier, a respected matriarch of the community. On the night of January 4th, the mob surrounded the Carrier house, where dozens of women and children had taken shelter. Inside, Sarah's son, Sylvester Carrier, was determined to protect them. When the mob tried to storm the house, gunfire erupted. In the chaos, Sarah Carrier was killed, and 2 of the white attackers were shot dead. The mob, stunned, fell back, but they would return in far greater numbers. News that white men had been killed turned the mob into a force of pure vengeance. Hundreds more poured into the area, and one by one, they put Rosewood to the torch. Homes, the church, the businesses, everything the community had built was set ablaze until the town was a field of fire and ash. The survivors had no choice but to run. Men, women, and children fled into the swamps, hiding in the freezing wetlands for days, wet, starving, and terrified as their homes burned behind them. They listened in the dark as everything they had ever known was destroyed. The official death toll was recorded as just 8, 6 black residents and 2 white attackers. But survivors always insisted the true number was far higher, with many more black victims never counted, and some buried in unmarked graves. As with Greenwood in Tulsa 2 years earlier, the real cost may never be fully known. But within this darkness, there were people who chose courage. 2 white train conductors, the Bryce brothers, ran their locomotive through the area and secretly carried women and children to safety. And a white shopkeeper named John Wright is said to have hidden survivors in his own home, shielding them from the mob. When the fires finally died, Rosewood simply ceased to exist. The survivors who escaped scattered across Florida and beyond. Almost none of them ever returned. The land where a thriving town once stood was left to be swallowed by the forest. And then came the silence. No one was ever charged. No one was ever punished. The survivors, scattered and traumatized, learned that it was safer to say nothing. Many never even told their own children where they had come from. For nearly 60 years, the massacre at Rosewood was buried, almost erased from history entirely. It was not until the 1980 that journalists began tracking down the elderly survivors, who were finally ready to tell what they had witnessed as children. Their testimony brought the story of Rosewood back into the light, and it raised a question Florida could no longer avoid. What did the state owe the people whose town it had allowed to burn? In the early 1990s, survivors and their descendants took their case to the Florida legislature. They demanded acknowledgement and justice. The state commissioned a team of historians to investigate, and their report confirmed the survivors' accounts. The destruction of Rosewood had been real, and the authorities had failed to protect its people. In 1994, Florida did something almost unheard of in American history. It passed a law to pay $150,000 to each surviving victim, one of the first times any government in the United States paid reparations for racial violence. It could not undo what was done, but for the first time, the state admitted the truth. Today, a single state historical marker stands along the highway where Rosewood used to be. Most people drive past it without ever knowing what happened there. But the descendants remember, and the story is finally being taught, not as a rumor but as fact. Rosewood was a town built by people determined to live free, destroyed in a week over an accusation that was never proven, then hidden from history for 2 generations. We remember it now, so that it can never be erased again. What other black towns were wiped from the map that we still don't know about? Tell us in the comments. This is Untold America. Subscribe, and next time, the enslaved man who stole a Confederate warship and became a congressman.